Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Today I'm making a baby quilt. I'm using the block that I shared in my last video, and I'll leave the link below. The quilt is all done. I still need to add a label, but I made all the blocks. I put them together. Here's the backing fabric that inspired my color choices, and since I didn't have quite enough of this, I did add some orphan blocks to my backing, which makes it a really fun kind of double-sided quilt. Let's get started. So here are the last of the blocks that I needed to make for my baby quilt. I ended up making 48 blocks, and my quilt ended up 40 inches by 51 inches. I thought it might get to 60 inches, but I kind of liked the way it looked. That's the way I work. I don't always have a firm plan, and this quilt ended up to be, I think, a good size at 40 by about 50 inches. After pressing the last of the blocks, I trimmed them all to 7 inches. I tried to get the 3.5 line at the corner of those center squares, and that way they would line up a little bit better when I put this quilt together. I laid the blocks all on the floor, and then I just picked them up row by row. I sewed those rows together, and then when each row was done, I put that whole quilt together. And with these blocks, they do have a direction. The stripes in that center square, I could have made them all go the same direction, but I kind of liked the way they looked when they were all mixed up, going this way and that. Since the backing fabric I began with was not quite big enough, I dug around in my orphan block drawer and I found these colorful pinwheels, and I had just almost enough to go across the middle of that quilt, and I'm going to sew them together in sets of 2, and then I'll put all those little 2 pinwheels together in a row, and I'll have almost enough to go across the quilt. I added little strips of fabric on both sides to give me that little excess I needed for when I quilt this quilt. I had a piece of batting that was the perfect size, and that's always a fun occurrence in my sewing room. I didn't have to cut the batting. It was just, like I said, almost perfect, just a tiny bit bigger than the quilt top, and that's exactly what I needed. I used a 505 spray, and I sprayed the batting. On the top here, I started at one end, and then I moved across little by little. I just smoothed that quilt top onto the batting. After I put the front on the batting with that 505 spray, I did the same thing with the backing fabric. I quilted my baby quilt through all of the quilt blocks, diagonally through all the quilt blocks, going both directions. I started in the middle using a little bit larger stitch, and with this quilt I used a light blue thread. After adding my quilting lines, I just used the quilt top as my guide, and I trimmed away the excess batting and backing. Here are my 2.5-inch strips I'll be using for my binding, and I joined them so that I would have enough to go all the way around my quilt. After pressing that long binding strip in half, I started on the back of my quilt. I left a tail of about 10 inches and I just attached it to the back of my quilt, and at each corner I stopped before the corner and I pivoted off that corner. I've done this many times on my channel, and I also have a couple of videos about how to add binding, but when I get to the corner, I stop before the end, I pivot, I sew off of that corner, and then I fold that binding up and then down, and then when I turn it right side to the right side later on, I'll have a nice fold there for when I top stitch all the way around. After I went almost all the way around, I stopped before I got to the end, and now I have two tails. I will fold one over sort of in the middle, and I will take that one on the right and I'll cut right along the fold. I need 2.5 inches left over on that fold, and I'll use that piece that I just cut off because that's 2.5 inches, and that will be my guide. I need that strip on the left to be just 2.5 inches so that this binding fits perfectly around my quilt. If you use a different width strip, if your strip is 2 inches, for example, you would need to cut a 2-inch extra piece there. And now I'll put the right sides together, again, sort of at a right angle like I did when I was joining my binding pieces. And then also a diagonal line sort of from corner to corner there, and I'll trim off that excess triangle. After the binding is joined so that it's continuous, all I need to do now is sew along that edge and finish up attaching the binding to the back. I rolled the binding to the front, I pinned it down, and then I top stitched all the way around. And here's the baby quilt all ready to go. I really enjoyed putting this one together, and it's always fun to sew with you. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.